Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So, I want to talk to you about layouts in a little more detail. And one of the things that I'd recommend you do is think about layouts and working with layouts in Act is almost like a completely separate program from Act software itself. The reason I say that is when you're creating layouts, it's almost like you're doing some design work. So, one of the first impacts or one of the first things you have to think about when you're designing a new layout is one, do you have the fields available to you to put into that layout? So if you don't have the field, and in this example I had done a favorite ice cream field, but let's say you want a field called favorite ice cream topping. Well, if you don't have that field already created, the first step is to go up to Tools, Define Fields, and create that field. And I went over that in a previous tutorial. But for now, we're just going to talk about some of the things that can happen. And again, this is the reason I told you, think of it as a different piece of software almost. Some of the things that can happen when you're working with the Layout Designer tool. And that is the new piece, or think of it as the separate piece of software. So the first thing I'm going to do is before I started this tutorial, I made a copy of this layout. And the copy is just simply Ice Cream B. Now, I'm going to come up to Tools, and I'm going to go to Design Layouts, and because this is a contact layout, and again, we have some other options here which I'm not going to go into right now, but I'm going to click on Contact. And that's going to open up my Layout Designer. So, with this Layout Designer, we can take fields and move them around. We can put them wherever we want. If I click the left mouse button and go up and drag up and just grab the field, well, I can move that wherever I want. I can drag it around the screen and drop it. Keep in mind that if you do something by mistake, the keyboard shortcut to undo what you just did is hold the control key down, the CTRL key, and then press the letter Z. That undoes what you just did. Also, if you go up to Edit, you'll notice that here we have Control Y and Control Z for undo and redo. So if you don't remember the shortcut, you can always come up to Edit and do it here. Now, when you mess around with fields, the layout right now looks pretty neat. Everything's aligned really nice. But when you start messing around with fields and move things all around, at some point you're going to want to neaten it up. You want to make it look good if you're using this every day. So on that note, as you add fields, you're probably going to want them to all be the same size. You're going to have them want to be the same look and just continuity. And that's where this can start getting a little crazy, because if you make things the wrong size, or you'll see this as you get into it, but you want to know that you can always come back to the layout and fine tune it. So I always tell people when they're first working in a layout and adding things, don't sweat the small stuff. Just get everything up there. Just get everything in the layout. Even if it's not in the perfect order, get it into the layout. Let me illustrate something. You can take things that are down below and bring them up onto this layout. And one of the things about Act that I've never liked is sometimes when things are down on the bottom tabs and you can't see them up here, if they're out of sight, they're out of mind. So we have all these fields down here which you could have valuable information in, but if you can't see it on the screen, well, what good is it? I'm going to come down here and I'm going to drag my pointer across these fields here, and I'm going to click and hold, and I'm just going to drag them up here. Now, you'll notice some things are different size. That's okay. I'm going to leave it like that for now, but I was able to just drag those up here real easy. Let me come grab these. I'm going to drag these up here as well. Okay, so I have just created this layout, and I've put everything in here. I sort of did it in sort of a weird order. I didn't put user one first, but I put things in a weird order, and I did that on purpose. I'm going to come up and I'm going to save this. Now, I'd already created this layout, so I don't mind saving over it. Normally, I would always recommend instead of save, do a file, save as. But I created this layout and I'm just going to save it. I'm going to close this. Now, when you create a layout and you're on that layout, it comes right up. But let me show you something you need to know about layouts and fields. When you have a contact in Act, in this layout, the first field is the contact field. When you press the tab key on your keyboard, again, the tab key, it goes down to the next field, and then the next, and the next. But I'm going to go back up, and I'm going to click in the first field. what you might or might not be aware of is when you press the Enter key on Act, it will jump ahead to a certain designated field. So I'm going to press the Enter key, and what it did is it jumped from the contact name over to the Address 1 field. If I press Enter again, it jumps down to the ID status field. So the Tab key is set to go field to field to field. Now, this is the last field I had created or was created. So now what happens is when I click on the Tab key, I would expect to go to the next field. Now, before I modified this, it would have gone right back here, typically. But if I click on this key and press the Tab key, it jumps to user 1, and then user 2, and user 3. But I really wanted to go favorite ice cream. I didn't want it to go to user 1. I wanted it to go here. So let me show you how layouts can start driving you a little crazy, frankly. I'm going to go back to Tools, and I'm going to go down to Design Layouts, and I'm going to go to Contact, and I want to show you something you need to be aware of. If you're in this Layout Designer, and you go up and click on View, now remember, I told you the Tab key goes from field to field to field. The Enter key goes, it can jump around to other areas quickly, so it can skip some fields. Under the View, I'm going to click on Tab Stops, and I'm going to click on Show Tab Stops. And all these numbers pop up. So this is where you'll jump to as you hit the Tab key. So this is the order in which you can jump to. So you'll notice this field is field 16. 17 is right here, but I want ice cream to be 17. I want to go from here to here. So what you'd have to do in this case is you'd have to go up to View, go to Tab Stops, and you'd have to clear all the tab stops. Now when you clear them, all these tab stops will go away, and then simply to bring them back, you click on the field in the order you want. And the first one will be 0, 1, 2, 3. So you can go all around. And when I get to 16, after doing all of these, I click on this one, then this one, and so on. And I put them in the order I want. So the tab keys can be set to go in the proper order. But this is where it gets tricky. When you're adding all these fields and moving things around, now you got to keep in mind that the last thing you want to do, and the very last thing, is you want to go in and modify the tab stops and the enter stops. Now I always tell people this. I tell people it's going to be awkward when you're adding fields. Worst case scenario, you can click on a field just to get there quickly instead of using the tab or enter key. But the last thing you want to do when you're doing this work is you want to come in and set the tab keys. And I always tell people, typically, when you do it the first time, I guarantee someone's going to want to add another field. And when you add another field and it gets out of order, you know what you got to do all over again? Yep, the tab stops. So I wanted to show this to you so you had an awareness of it. But be aware that layouts can drive you a little crazy. Just to go back here for a minute, I'm going to go back to tab stops, and I'm going to click a second time on Show Tab Stops to take them away. I'm going to go back to View. I'm going to go to the Enter Stops and go Show Enter Stops. And these are where things will jump around to when you hit the Enter key. In the old days, it used to be just the opposite. The Enter key took you field to field to field, and the Tab key jumped to these green areas. So this can just make the navigation of Act a little bit easier. And you know what? I'm a big believer in if I can make the usability of Act easier for you and your staff, that's a great tool. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tony Holowitz. Thank you so very much. Have a great day.